I think social media gives the impression that, because you see people who are like huge, like in their 20s, and you're like, oh, that's gotta be me. Actually, if you look at the majority of history, a lot of artists don't get famous until they're much, much older. And there's something wrong with that. I love vintage. The majority of what I wear is vintage, but everything is a trend. And eventually, vintage is not gonna be hot anymore. So what's next?
What has been your most significant turning point?
In 2022, when we blew up on TikTok, that was like a huge turning point. You don't have to share everything that you make. Some of it is just for yourself, and it's experimentation. It's all about, so if you're for advice, it's all about, yeah. We're rocking and rolling.
All right, I think we should start with just an introduction. So.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, my name is Steven. I am one half of Creamy or CRMY Studios, whatever makes you most comfortable.
One half, huh?
One half, yeah. So the other half is my brother, Peter, who does not like to be on camera. So it's just me doing this. What inspired us to start? We started just like upcycling clothing in 2018. Yeah, sorry. I don't know where to look. Just look around. No.
It's the end of the day. For preference to anyone watching, it's the end of the day.
It's the end of the day.
It's the end of
I've been
ThriftCon.
airbrushing tees all day, haven't eaten.
You've been working for 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, shout out ThriftCon. We started hand painting on stuff and like screen printing. And the main idea was kind of putting art on clothing, like using the t-shirt as a canvas instead of a canvas. Because at that time, it seemed easier to sell a t-shirt than to sell a canvas. Well, now I think we actually would have a lot of success selling canvases, but that's like a different conversation. But so it's all about getting the art on the t-shirt. And it was his idea to use like an airbrush. He's like, this would be like an easier method. And then how did we develop our style? By never being classically trained on how to airbrush. So it's just like we just started, yeah. And we treated it more like a marker per se, or something like kind of like that, or like a pencil than like an actual brush. And then because it's actually a brush, then like combining those two things kind of like is kind of the effect that we kind of I don't know, get the style.
So it's almost like the style just came from error and iteration.
Pretty much, yeah. Now like we've been like retroactively going back and kind of like learning some more of like the fundamentals, which is like a fun process, you know. There's like, you know, there's the two different phrases or the two different sayings of like, you got to learn the rules to break the rules. But then sometimes when you know the rules, it actually like keeps you boxed in and you're not actually able to do things that you wouldn't have learned. So
can you share the story behind your name, Creamy?
Yeah,
I mean, there is a story.
Yeah. I mean, that shit was just like an inside joke between like me and some friends in college. And it wasn't even like there was no basis to it either. It was just like, it was a word that we thought was funny that like, you know, cream exists in like the streetwear kind of like sphere, but like creamy is a word to describe something cool, like as in like groovy from the 70s. That was really just like where, that was like the joke. When you explain the inside joke, it's not really that funny. But in a way, we've kept it because, you know, a lot of times it makes people uncomfortable or they think it's funny. And either way, that's eliciting a reaction from them, so it's slightly more memorable. But we dropped the vowels because that made it feel more like adult or mature. So, yeah.
I personally found you guys back in 2021.
Okay, word.
On TikTok.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I think one of the most iconic visual representation of your guys' brand is that smiley face.
Yes.
That you first started drawing.
Yeah.
Back in 2021. Did that have any correlation to the name, or was that just the design?
No. That actually started as a sticker that Peter did in like 2018, and we just like started like using it more when we realized it, like people really liked it. So yeah.
Can you walk us through your creative process when designing a new piece?
Yeah.
How do you decide on the visual concept?
For sure. I mean, at one point, a lot of it was just like kind of be like stream of consciousness, like on the spot. Like we would just kind of like approach the t-shirt. Now, other times though, because a lot of times we're airbrushing on vintage pieces or like vintage like tees. So like if it already has a graphic on it, then that graphic probably will influence what we're gonna airbrush on it. Like easy
Mm-hmm.
examples is like college stuff or like sports stuff. Like I'll then try to do like the mascot in our style or like different visuals from the teams or the schools or like whatnot. So that's like that kind of is like what influences it. We used to do a lot of like holiday specific collections or like more curated like themes,
Okay.
and like we would then kind of like, wow, yeah, we haven't done this in a minute, but we'd like build a world off of it, you know. And so then we'd come up with maybe characters or different like repetitive images that we would just like repeat through that series or that collection, to kind of like tell a story. It's all about storytelling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're for advice, it's all about storytelling.
All about storytelling. So I feel like you definitely, obviously, the smiley face. We just talked about that.
Mhm.
That's been very cohesive throughout
Yeah.
your brand. There's another. I guess it's a human face that you guys draw. It's
It's a
very
the monster face.
the
Yeah,
monster face. Yeah, monster
yeah.
face. It's very distinguishable.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's cohesive a lot across your design.
Yeah, yes. So we have like what we try to do is have those like cohesive elements and then mix. So for example, if it's like Halloween, okay, we'll do like some horror related stuff, but maybe instead of like, or the jack-o'-lantern has the grin face on it, or like, you know, Frankenstein looks more like one of our monster faces, or the human face. It kind of depends on the season. So like Halloween would probably be more of a monster. If we're doing something Western, you know, we'll do that face, but with a cowboy hat. It's all about like iconography, and you want to have icons that are easily recognizable to like what you're doing or like what you're trying to like, if it's a brand or an idea, like whatever. And so I think that's been a big approach for us, is having those things. You just repeat it over and over and over and over and over again. Basically like hammering the audience on the head with it. But you can't do it like, if we just did like grin or face tees and that was it, people would probably get tired of it. But because we're sprinkling in all this other stuff, it still feels fresh. But you're seeing this logo over and over and over and over again.
What has been your most significant turning point or points or breakthroughs in your career so far?
Deciding to airbrush was the turning point, because that kind of like birthed basically what the brand is today, or the art house idea. Because what it was before that was like looked completely different. So I'd say that was like a big turning point. I would say in 2022 when we blew up on TikTok, that was like a huge turning point. Peter's knowledge of TikTok, because I'm not on there like a
Yeah,
ton. We would
okay.
like post, but that was it. But he like knew kind of how to game it, and like, you know, once you start doing something on there and it works, if you just repeat it over and over again. Yeah. Um
For reference, Peter is here. He just doesn't want to be
Yeah,
on
Peter's
camera.
right over there. Yeah, just like the TikTok cheat code, basically. And then we would just like funnel people to the Instagram. So that was kind of like, that was a turning point. Jordan Poole reached out to us. Does he still play for? It's on the Wizards now.
Yeah.
If you're not a NBA.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he reached out to us, and we did a custom Michigan sweatshirt for him, and he wore that to one of the games, and that was like, that kind of like helped us curate this like sports fan audience too.
How do you see your work fitting into the larger fashion industry or mainstream fashion industry,
Yeah.
particularly in custom and vintage clothing space, so the vintage community?
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because we've been in kind of this like custom one of one game for a while, and I'm someone who gets like sick of things after a while. But I think like the general mainstream audience, I don't think this like custom one of one stuff has fully gone mainstream. So it'll be interesting to kind of see if or when that happens. I'm not like trying to retroactively say like we're ahead of the curve, but like there's definitely, you know, custom clothing has always been a thing. I just think something with the renaissance of like vintage and like secondhand. I think COVID, with people having like a ton of idle time, kind of like created this kind of like custom garment, resurgency, I don't know. And the greater like kind of like fashion sense. I don't know if you've heard of the artist Cheeto, but
I have.
he's done stuff with like Givenchy, you know, and so that's like airbrush on like high fashion. So, you know, you're seeing it there. I can't say how much we've influenced anything. Like I don't know. I do know there's a company that our stuff like popped up in like one of their like creative direction decks. Which is cool. Like that's flattering.
Because it's you see it in other places, but in small doses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yes.
But those small doses really stand out.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And it'll be curious how widely adopted it gets. Yeah. I think with vintage, saying because like you know, I love vintage. Majority of what I wear is vintage, but everything is a trend, and eventually, vintage is not going to be hot anymore. So what's next? That's the
Kinda
question you gotta
adapt.
ask
That's the
yourself.
question
That's the
you
question.
How do you stay motivated and inspiring during challenging times?
Sleep.
Sleep,
Actually,
yeah.
like getting good sleep.
I'm with you on that
It can
one.
be fun to deprive yourself of sleep, and then you can have some really cool creative ideas, but that's also like playing with fire. So actually getting good sleep is like really good for that. I'd say having a good group of creative friends is a good way to like keep yourself motivated and inspired, especially like if you're in a slump. That's been really big for us. I think also just like having each other too.
Are these friends that you've known before you got into airbrushing, or was it along the way?
All of the above.
All the
So
above, a mix of both.
some post us starting airbrushing, some like, you know, friends from college. I mean, send stuff to our dad. Our dad like went to fine art school. So yeah, we have like, I mean, we're lucky. We have a good like support network of like homies and whatnot. So yeah. You know, when you're feeling uninspired, I feel like sometimes you can then like, you kind of get this hopeless feeling. And then when you feel hopeless, like you don't really know what to do. But really all it is just like sitting down and like looking at shit that makes you inspired and like reminding yourself like,
So I feel like it's
why you do it.
very easy to create when life is good, things are going well. It's easy to just be like, oh yeah, I feel great and inspired to make this wonderful thing. I don't care if it does well or not. I don't care what people think about it. But it's a different story when, I don't know, you're low on income and
Right.
rent's coming up, where you don't know have
Yes.
you know financial situation, or you have an argument with your partner or whatever it may be. You know, it's a different story when you also your business is being creative.
Right. No, it is. It is.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that.
So like getting good sleep and all that stuff is crucial.
Getting good sleep, having good homies.
And maybe we're just getting old, but
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Don't do drugs. Don't let the drugs do you.
If you could give any advice to anyone pursuing the same path as you, what would be a piece of advice for them?
That's a good question.
Or we can rephrase it as in, if you could go back in time
Right.
to 5
Advice
years
to
ago and give
myself.
yourself advice, what would that be?
Slow down. Slow down. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a race. You don't have to make it, which I don't even know what the fuck that means.
That's a really good one.
Until you don't have, it doesn't matter. You know, I think social media makes you, gives the impression that if you're, especially with like creatives that like, oh, because you see people who are like huge, like in their 20s, and you're like, oh, that's got to be me. And it's like, actually, if you look at the majority of history, a lot of artists don't get famous until they're much, much older.
Yeah,
and there's
most of
something
them
wrong
aren't
with
famous
that.
until they're dead.
Yeah, well, yeah. Best thing you can do for your career is die.
Yeah.
But then your career's over. So, yeah.
Slow down.
Slow down. Yeah, and you don't have to share everything that you make. Some of it is just for yourself, and it's experimentation. But don't. Some people do that and they don't share anything, And I think that's bad too, because it is good to get feedback and it feels good sharing your art.
I think that about wraps it up. Do you have any
Word.
last closing thoughts?
No, but just shout out ThriftCon. Thank you guys for having us. This is a great
Thank you
event.
for coming.
Shout out Louisville. Yeah, maybe we'll come to another one. This is sweet. Appreciate it.
For sure.
Word.
Thanks for being on it.
Yeah, thank you, bro.